video is a video about one organizational pattern called narration. In this video, we will look at one style of writing that can be used in academic settings, narration. We will go over the elements of narration as well as the process of writing a narrative. What is a narrative? Essentially, it is a story. When many people hear the term narrative, they think of fictional stories, but not all stories are fiction. Non-fiction, expository narratives are stories that are used to explain or prove a point. When you write a narrative, you're recounting events, so you will answer the questions of who, where, when, what, why, and how. You may write in different points of view, which will influence the way in which narrative influences the audience. You can write in first person, telling a personal story or experience, or you can write in third person, telling a story or an anecdote in an impersonal tone of voice. How long should a narrative in an academic essay be? It depends on the nature of the essay. In an extended narrative, which is a long episode that by itself illustrates or supports the thesis, you can tell a longer story that extends throughout the essay, with references to the story at different points in the essay. A brief narrative is a shorter story or incident that is used in a body paragraph to support or illustrate a particular point in an essay. For example, if you were to write an essay showing how confusing the registration process is, you could recount your friend's 7-hour experience signing up for classes. Alternatively, perhaps you are writing an essay arguing that side door airbags should be mandatory. You could include a brief narrative about a car accident to support your argument. You need to choose the right type of story to include and make sure to frame it in a way that suits your purpose and your audience. Stories are often remembered much longer than other facts given in a speech or an essay. No matter what type fits your purpose, telling a story can be an interesting and persuasive way to inform your reader. Now let's think about how to go about writing a narrative. What is the process? First, you need to be clear about your purpose. Do you have an objective of retelling a historical event to give your reader some basic facts? So, for example, the dropping of the atomic bomb? Or are you telling a subjective narrative that tells a story from a clearly defined point of view? For example, the struggles faced by the Chinese workers during the building of the CN railways. Or is it a personal story whose lessons you wish to share with your audience? Whichever you are doing, an objective retelling of the facts or a subjective interpretation, your purpose needs to be clear to the reader. Don't leave your reader wondering why you are telling the story or what the story means. Next, present your main point clearly. Whether you start off with your thesis or build up to it, make sure it is clear. An implied thesis is risky, leaving too much chance for misinterpretation. In terms of organization, you need to make sure you have a logical time sequence. Most narratives should follow a chronological order, presenting actions as they naturally occur in the story. A flashback technique might work, but it is very challenging to use shifts in time. You need to use clear transitional phrases and other signals to ensure that your readers don't become lost or confused. It takes a really good writer to use flashbacks. Remember that the reason for using a narrative is to engage and persuade your reader, not to confuse them. Finally, your conclusion must provide the reader with a sense of completion. As I said earlier, make sure that you don't leave your reader wondering why you've told the story. As you craft your narrative, you also need to pay attention to the words and phrases that can paint a picture and draw the reader into your story. Use sensory details to hold your reader's interest. Use precise words that allow the reader to see, hear, feel, and smell your story. Remember that effective description relies on vivid, specific details. Use characters and dialogue if absolutely needed. Your reader should be able to visualize your characters. They should be realistic, not phony or stereotyped. Make sure that the motives behind the actions of the characters are clear, otherwise your story won't make sense. Dialogue must also be realistic. Be cautious when using a story with dialogue in an academic style essay. Remember to always make sure that your stories are appropriate for the purpose and the audience. A few other tips for writing narratives include choosing your subject carefully. It is easier to write about something you know well, and it is hard to write convincingly on something that you don't know well. Limit the scope of your story. Generally, it is better to pick a specific episode and flesh it out with specific details rather than telling a story that is too long or complex for your assignment or purpose. For example, you may have had many rewarding experiences as a lifeguard, but focus on the one experience that encapsulates the essence of your attitude toward your job. Don't let your story lag or wander. Have you ever heard a storyteller get stuck on an insignificant detail? It was Sally. No, it was Joe. No, wait. Or maybe they've made a short story too long with too many insignificant details. These mistakes ruin the pacing of the stories. The tempo of the story gets bogged down until the readers are bored silly. Leave out inessential information and focus on the important events, people, and places. Finally, make sure you contextualize your story. If you just drop in an anecdote without any explanation before or after it, you may leave your audience wondering what's going on. While the reason for the anecdote may be obvious to you, don't assume it will be obvious to the reader. Remember to always make clear the point of the story and how it relates to your main idea, either in your essay or in the paragraph. You can also include something called a naysayer in your essay by using narrative. Here, your narrative might be a story of someone who disagrees with you in the conversation you had or would have. You can use your imagination here. This strategy allows you to anticipate negative responses and address them in your essay. If done well, this can be an effective way to persuade those who have the same questions or responses. The best way to learn how to use a narrative is to read some examples. Margaret Atwood's autobiographical story called Under the Thumb, or How I Became a Poet, recounts how she became a poet, and she does so in a humorous and informative manner. So read her article, which is located at the Acne Reader website, and the URL is on the screen. This article is Atwood's literacy narrative. A literacy narrative is your own personal story and reflection of how you came to read and write to become literate. Depending on the length, you may tell the whole story of your reading and writing experiences. However, in most cases, you will focus on one important part of your narrative. For example, Atwood focuses on how she became a poet. So as you read it, think about what you can learn from Atwood's literacy narrative. After you've done that, try to write your own literacy narrative using the techniques we've discussed. Start by drafting an outline, including all the essential details organized in chronological order. Post your outline in Blackboard and get comments back on it. In this video, you've learned about the elements of a narrative and the process of writing a narrative. You've been introduced to Atwood's article Under the Thumb and drafted an outline for your own literacy narrative. Literacy narratives are a good reflective tool for students because it allows them to reflect on how and why they came to their feelings about reading and writing. Becoming a good writer requires reflective thinking about writing. Thank you for listening.